Welcome to the Inner Space Project podcast, where we explore the full spectrum of emotions, from joy and love to sadness and fear, taking you on an inner space journey that challenges societal norms, encourages open dialogue, and raises awareness about all the parts of us, including the ones that may seem dark and mysterious. I'm your host, Dr. Patti Ashley, psychotherapist, author, TEDx speaker, and clinical trainer. Thank you for joining me as we navigate the labyrinth of emotions, dismantle stigma, and pave the way for a more compassionate and connected world. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Inner Space Project podcast. I'm Dr. Patti Ashley, your host, and I'm excited to introduce my guest today, who is a child psychologist in Virginia, and she's been doing that work for 15 years. And she's also the mother of an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. And she just happens to be my daughter. So welcome, Elizabeth Herman. Thanks for being with us today.
Mom.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Oh,
I
and also in terms of your bio, you're also, you and I team up for Moms in Real Life. We've been doing retreats and trainings online for years, and haven't done one recently, but hopefully we'll do one again in 2025.
One of these days.
We did our Moms in Real Life course on my website. So people can check that out. And that was during COVID. So it's really helpful because that was a rough time for all of us as parents. And a lot of good tips, which actually can be used even post-COVID. So I recommend people check out the Moms in Real Life course on my website. But today we're going to talk about school, your children and school, and some things that a school psychologist may be able to help you with, inform you with. And so I thought I'd start with asking you, Elizabeth, tell the listeners about what exactly is your role? What is a school psychologist? What does your day look like?
Yeah.
Walk us through a day in a life.
Okay. So once upon a time, my mother, who was a special ed teacher in a previous life, told me about this job called school psychology, which I had never heard of. And I think that's common. I think most people don't know what school psychologists are because I feel like we're kind of like this hidden clinician, lurking in schools. And we because we're very understaffed. We're one of the most people kind of ask me a lot of times if I say, oh, I'm a school psychologist. They're like, oh, like a counselor? It's like kind of like a school counselor, but in where I live in the Commonwealth of Virginia, school counselors actually are in our standards of quality for education. So they have a set ratio set by the Board of Ed. And so there's actually a better ratio for them than for us. So because we're so specialized and we were actually brought into existence in the 70s to start identifying students with disabilities because that didn't exist prior. So that was sort of how this profession was born as far as being separate from clinical psychologists in the field, was that need to have specialists to identify who met that criteria for having a disability, such as a learning disability, dyslexia, autism, ADHD. There's actually 14 categories, it's a whole thing. So that's why we exist. But as we've learned more about mental health and the importance of supporting mental health in school, our role has expanded, which has been a good thing. But unfortunately, we're also, because in most states, we're not in those standards of quality, and there's just a shortage, we're often understaffed. And so we usually serve way more students than we should. Our national Association of School Psychologists, I believe, recommends a ratio of about 1 to 750. But most school psychologists have a ratio of about 1 to 1,200 to 2,000. So I know for me this year, I know
150 students.
Yeah. So that would be like a recommended ratio. So that would be like me at one full-time at one elementary school, for example.
You would serve 750 students.
Well, right now my ratio is probably close to 1 to 2,000, and it's actually lower than it's been, I know, in a long time because I'm at a high school. So unfortunately, when you have a high school that they're big schools, and they usually have at least 1,000 students. Mine is a little, I want to say 1,800 students. And then I got lucky this year. I'm at a really teeny little elementary school that only has 200 students.
Mm.
So, but I also support an intern, and I am helping her at her school. So, adds a little more to the workload. And then the district where I'm currently is understaffed by 7 psychologists. So we're 7 short of fully staffed. So we have schools that are uncovered. So we're all kind of pitching in like we do in public education, and, everyone kind of picks up the slack as best we can. And so I'm covering partially like a third of an additional school
Mm.
to support the needs of students there. But it is unfortunate when you don't have, I will say, a full-time, or not even full-time, just a dedicated school psychologist assigned to your building, because I do think the scope of what we do for buildings is very helpful in terms of understanding just what's developmentally appropriate for kids. You can kind of help support with behavioral needs, with learning needs. We're kind of trained in all of those things. We're trained to understand like learning development, behavior from ages pre-K up to transition from public ed. So I don't know if most people know this, but most students can stay in public education until they're 22. So oftentimes students with what we call low incidence disabilities that have a higher level of support need will stay in the public education system until they're 22. So like that happens at my high school, where we have job coaching and other transition services that go into play and to help support that piece of it in a very different way, where I'm doing kind of more assessments to like document a level of need as they go into adulthood. So, along the way, there's a lot that we do to help support the needs of students with disabilities and, their non-disabled peers who might struggle from time to time with, behavioral or emotional needs.
Yeah, it's a lot. And you and I were talking about, what we wanted to talk about on this interview today. And of course, it's a huge topic, education, and it's where our
Mm-hmm.
children go every day. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to say at the beginning of the podcast is this podcast is divided into beginnings, middles, and endings, because I want to look at all aspects of life. But our interview today is about, the first 18 years of life. And that's where our kids live, is
Right.
in
I
school.
spend a lot of time there. Yeah.
And how how under resourced when you say there's
Mm-hmm.
7 openings, and you're
Yeah.
serving 1,000 children. And we were talking about before we started the podcast, the questions, and speaking to that, and I really didn't realize honestly that you had that big of a caseload.
Yeah.
I did.
Well, in my previous district, so I'm in a district now where I've been, this is my second year. But prior to that, I was one district for 10 years in a row, and it's my district where I live. And I liked it, but it was pretty stressful. And that's why I ended up leaving and doing some telehealth work for a couple of years, because my ratio was 1 to 3,600 my last 3 years there. And it was, yeah,
Did
it
not
was
know
really
that.
overwhelming. I know, I
Wow.
know. Yeah, you just keep trucking in education, you just go, go, go. And so taking that time off was really helpful for me. One, it was just nice. There's a lot of, options now, post COVID. One of the things, that did come out of it was us understanding technology a little better and how to deliver services in a different way, and that it isn't, it can be done well. And so I actually really enjoyed that work. And so that just kind of gave me the opportunity to kind of clear my head a little bit from the overwhelm. And now I am, we're understaffed where I am now, but it's a different, I was able to kind of take some time and go back kind of ready
Mm.
to work. But again, everyone's trying, we're trying to recruit. It's just, it's one of those things. We're trying really hard to let high school students know about us, because as kids are going to college and thinking about careers, most people don't know about school psychology. And I think it's a really great field for people who are interested in the psychology field.
Mhm.
Maybe you don't want to be like a clinician who does like therapy, or even a researcher. They might just want to, they're good like problem solvers, and they want to kind of get to the bottom of problems and collect data and analyze data. If that's what you're into, it's a great profession for someone with that kind of interest. And so, yeah, it's
So the majority of your day is doing psychological testing, and then
mhm. And meetings related to special ed service. Yep. A
yeah,
lot of meetings.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
meetings. And the information you gather from your testing
Mhm.
informs the programs for the kids.
That's right.
So
Yep.
What should parents be aware of in terms of maybe seeking out resources from a school psychologist?
Yeah, so it's good to know one that we exist and two, and we usually do. And it's, one of the things I like doing the best is when we have these meetings, and most places have them, they just call them something different. They a long time ago were called child study.
Mm.
In my district, they're called a student resource team. And it's sort of like you're not quite talking about special education or disability yet. You're kind of talking about, okay, let's problem solve a little bit. Let's see what's going on. There's a child who's like not meeting some kind of standard and we're not sure why. So let's talk about it. And that's where we bring like the parents in, and the teachers are there, and an admin and other support staff. And I usually work pretty closely with my social worker colleagues because we're kind of in the same boat, or we're itinerant and bounce from school to school. And we like, it's just a really great opportunity for us to be at the table to help kind of hear the big picture of what's available, what's happening, what the struggles are, and kind of help drive that problem solving process, which is I always feel like that's where I feel the most productive, because I feel like we can kind of all come to the table, talk about what's up, and then just make connections and problem solve, and then make a plan to like collect data to see if what we've put in place is helpful or not. So if like for any parent who's concerned about their child's progress, you can always ask for a meeting. It doesn't have to mean you're asking for, special education. It could just mean I want to have a conference or a problem solving meeting. You can always ask to have more people at the table. Like if your
Right.
concern is behavioral or emotional or mental health related, you absolutely should say, hey, is there a social worker or school psychologist available? Because that's sort of where we come in with a level of expertise that most people in education don't have.
Which brings up two other questions for me. One, and I'll just say them both and you can speak to them however you want, but
Yeah.
is like tell everybody what is the difference between a social worker and a school
Yeah.
psychologist. And the other one is I learned years ago, because you said earlier I was a special ed teacher
Mhm. Yep.
in the last century.
Yeah.
um, and back then, and I don't know how much the laws have changed, but back then, if parents made a referral, the schools
Mhm.
had to act on it. It
Oh, yeah.
legal, and I don't think a lot of parents know that,
Right.
how to advocate for their
Hmm.
children. And so those two questions: the difference between a social worker and a psychologist, school psychologist,
Yeah.
and parents' rights in terms of making referrals and actually being listened to.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, social workers are the best. I love them. And they're like our little, our besties. We go from school to school, and we kind of are in the same boat, like I said, where we're not permanent in a building. So, but we always have to be at the table when we're talking about disabilities, because the social worker's job is to collect the parent input. So they usually write up a whole social history about the child's development, medical needs, school experience. Like the information that they're able to bring to the table is basically the parents' side of everything. And they're so important. In most districts, too, the school social workers are the ones who are the experts in like resources in the community. So, how do we connect the parent to like a therapist or some behavioral health services, or maybe even like knowing where to get free eyeglasses? Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. Like, I feel like that's usually what they're really good about, connecting parents with all of those kinds of community based resources to address needs. Whereas, like, our job is to collect the testing data from the student and then also get the teacher input.
Okay.
So we usually go into the classroom, although in my district, because the psychologist side is short staffed, the social worker side isn't, they've started doing our classroom observations for us, which has been awesome and really helpful.
Oh,
And so when we can't get in, they will. And I feel like it's nice sometimes too to hear their perspective of kind of what the classroom environment looked like in relation to that student. And then they always say they like it. It's funny. I'm like, oh no, I can do it. And they're like, no, 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 it's fun. It gives me like kind of breaks
yeah.
things up and lets me do something different. And I don't know, for those who really like being in schools, being in a classroom is fun, like especially at the elementary.
Yeah.
It's a good time. Now sitting in a history class in high school is a different story,
Oh,
but I've been trapped in the back of one before doing an observation where I couldn't leave once the class started. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. Those block schedules are rough. But and then let's see. So your other question was where like the process of getting support. Is that what it
yeah,
was?
like parents legally have rights
Oh
that
yeah.
they have to be, schools have to act on a referral.
Yes.
If a parent comes in and says, hey, I need you to check out this
Yeah.
concern I have about my child, the schools
Mm-hmm.
have to act on it. But I think oftentimes because again, we're talking about how stressed schools are.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh, well, I mean, schools will say, oh, well, and then parents will go, oh, well,
Mm-hmm.
they're not doing anything about it. I don't think they realize legally the schools have to act on it.
Right, for sure. And so there's several parts of that. So the first part is one that's mandated by the state. However, in the national law, part of that is like the Individuals with Disabilities and Education Act, and child find is a
Mhm.
core component of that law. And what that means is the local education agency, which is the school district, is responsible for finding any child that might require any services beyond the general curriculum. They're obligated to find those children because some children might be in private school, they might be homeschooled, they might be too young to have enrolled in school yet.
Mhm.
Those in those cases, the parents often bring them up. Also, in some cases, the teacher may not know some of the things going on behind the scenes. They might not know the child maybe sees a therapist because of a behavioral health diagnosis and does have a diagnosed disability. So in those cases, when the parents start to feel like that disability is impacting the child at school in some educational way that would require additional service, they can ask for an evaluation. So they can ask for an evaluation. Now, the district, this is where things get a little fuzzy and it varies state to state. At bare minimum, the district is obligated to hear the parent out with a full team and what we call screen it and say, let's screen it and look at this child's educational history. Because, from my perspective, if you have a child who has been exceeding expectations in the classroom, all their soft skills, like the way they interact with their peers and participate, it's all that's intact and we have data to support that. To me, if a parent brings that up because there's an outside concern, that might be like that might not be a special education need and might not warrant an evaluation. But again, that's usually pretty rare. Usually when a parent brings up an issue, there's like something happening, like some grade that's lower, some incident at school, whether it's like a social skills problem, or
Yeah.
usually it's not for nothing. So that would be, I would say, like this teeny exception when the district wouldn't be obligated to what we call collect additional data, which is
Mhm.
basically do the evaluations. Um, but I mean, again, keeping that in mind, just because a parent asks for it, like for example, this is when it tends to occur most often is like a private school student, right? So kids in private school, they're doing just fine, making progress. The private school brings in their report cards, the kid's doing great. But the parents like, but they, I don't know, have ADHD or anxiety or something. Um, from our perspective as the local education agency, we don't see a need for additional services or a reason to collect data because what this child is doing is meeting all the or exceeding school standards. Now, in the public school, usually like we're following them. The kids are taking regular assessments. We're collecting data throughout the school year and throughout all the years they're in school. So we have usually good data. And what happens most often is like a teacher or someone will bring someone up and be like, hey, we're really concerned about the student. And then part of my job is to like look at the educational record. And usually you can see, oof, this kid has not passed a single,
Mhm.
especially at the high school. Like this kid has not passed any state standard assessment like their whole career. Like, yeah, this is like something might be happening here. And that's a lot of times like maybe with a ninth grader, because middle school, sometimes things get lost in the shuffle. And so we'll get those ninth graders who are really struggling off the bat and we're like, what's up here? And then we look at the history and it's like, oh yeah, they've had this history of academic struggle. And now in high school, the classes count because they're have to earn credits towards graduation. So it's not like you can just move kids along. If you don't pass a class, you do it again. So
Mhm.
it's a struggle. But
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, so if a parent suspects their child might have a learning disability, an attentional issue, anything that might require supports to address their educational needs, that's when a school psychologist would do an eval. If you don't have any concerns about school, but at home, maybe there's some things going on you think might warrant a mental health diagnosis, that's would be the difference between going to a school eval versus a private practice eval or like an eval from a community-based provider.
Well, and it's a great resource for parents to have that kind of testing available in the schools because it's very expensive in the private sector,
Mm-hmm.
because you've worked.
Well, and usually you can't also, most private practices don't test for learning disabilities because you can't bill insurance for that in most cases
Oh,
either.
right, right,
So,
right.
which is, I think, kind of wrong. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a diagnosis. It's yeah. So that's one of those kind of gray areas where oftentimes, um, yeah, like private practice won't test for that.
So tell us a little bit too about the resources that are available. I know that some children will
Mm-hmm.
qualify for what's called an IEP, an individualized
Mm-hmm.
educational plan, and some kids
Mm-hmm.
get what's called a 504 plan. And I think the 504 plan is one that a lot of parents don't know about either.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about
Yeah.
both of those or any other accommodations or
Yeah.
support systems?
So yeah, so that's a big part again of like what we do is like try to figure out like does this child really need like when you have an IEP, what that means is you have accommodation. So accommodations are just mild changes to the learning environment, like things that don't require changes to the curriculum itself. So we're just like making sure you're seated in a place that's, close to the point of instruction to reduce distractions. We're making sure we're like doing a regular homeschool communication system to keep up with things. So we're making accommodations. Those can be offered through a Section 504 plan or an IEP. The IEP has accommodations built in, but it also has service minutes. So that's the big difference. That IEP is that program for that student that's specific to them and only them. And it's got goals in the areas of weakness. Those goals have data that are attached to them that are collected every 4.5 weeks. I mean, it's really intense. It's followed by a case manager. And that's when the child really can't meet the grade level curriculum without those supports. And we've kind of proven that with testing that like the gaps are too wide, they need supports. So if that's not the case, so say a kid has ADHD, which is probably the most common, but making grade level performance, like meeting grade level standard,
Mm-hmm.
in those cases, the student might still need accommodations because they do have a disability. And so that's where they might not qualify under special education law, so IDEA, but what they would qualify under is Section 504 of just the General Individuals with Disabilities Act.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that is really in the school setting, in the workplace, it applies to college, really any place that that person interacts with the world. If the way the wording is if you have a disability that affects a major life function, learning is a major life function. So that's usually common, writing. There's lots of things on there that are relevant to school that are major life functions. You could get those accommodations in place. That doesn't usually require an evaluation, just documentation of the disability itself that, maybe a doctor's diagnosed it, whatever. So that's a little easier to get to because it's a general education support, not a special education. Special education has a lot of,
Right.
barriers to
So
entry.
there's a lot of talk about autism these days. Where
Mm-hmm.
does autism fit into
Oh my
service?
gosh.
I know it's a
It's
big
a good
question.
question. Yeah, because it is. I mean, I feel like, and I don't, it's one of those things that's so interesting because actually before I became a school psychologist, as you know, I worked in autism research in between undergrad and grad school for 4 years in Autism Research Center. And that was in the early 2000s when it was just kind of becoming more part of like the public awareness. So even when I went to work down there, I had to learn a lot about what is autism because it just wasn't as commonly understood. And then so seeing the like growth of our just collective understanding of what it means to be autistic, hearing from people who are like autistic people and hearing their voices now that they're older and can speak to some of the therapies that happen. So I feel like the whole field has really moved like light years since like my first entrance into that awareness. It's really remarkable. And our understanding of just so many things that are happening. So it's a neurodevelopmental disability. So it's like a brain difference. So some people call that like neurospicy has become like kind of the cutesy way to talk about that. And but what it really though, but it's a neurological difference. And it's that meets certain criteria. But again, it's always been thought of as a spectrum from the very beginning. And what that means is that some children might require specially designed instruction, which is what we call special ed service, right?
Mhm.
IEP, which means IEP basically, but specially designed instruction is kind of what we refer to when we're changing that curriculum. And that could be things like building social skills, incorporating behavior regulation strategies, like all those kinds of things that might be related to that autism diagnosis. But a child or autistic child might also just need some accommodations in the classroom setting. They might be able to, meet the general education. So it doesn't mean like
They
one
could
or
have
the other. And
either.
some autistic individuals need nothing in
Yeah.
terms of special supports.
Yeah. So
So it really is like
yeah.
variable and
Yeah.
dependent on the individual's needs.
Um, I probably would love to have you back on in a few months to talk more about autism because I think it is a
Mm-hmm.
big topic these days. I've never
Yeah.
Neurospicy, is that another word for neurodivergent, or is that something else?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So because of time, well, that's great. That's really helpful. And I think that
Yeah.
it's a good time for us to wrap up. And I just wondered if there's anything else you want to say about school psychology, schools today, or just anything else that you want to share with our listeners.
Yeah, I think just one, like I think parents knowing that like there are schools, every school is required to have a school psychologist. You can't talk about any kind of special ed services without it. And those services are governed by, our state departments of ed, which are oversaw by our national Department of Ed. And that's really important that we the goal of those agencies is to really protect individuals with disabilities and
Mm-hmm.
making sure like the services are delivered the way they should be. Just like parents are advocating for their students with disabilities, making sure so we're all really working together. But it is complicated. There is also, a shortage of staff in special education in the whole field in terms of teachers, really everything. So I think it's hard because I believe, having worked in a few different school districts and been in this field a while, I feel like most educators like really have the best interests of kids in mind and want to support kids. So I think the best thing a parent can do is to go in knowing that you're on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you might need to nudge the school a little more to do if you don't feel like your child's making progress, but also know that, the school's job is to collect data and make data informed decisions. And, we have to kind of listen to that too and hear all sides.
Yeah.
So one, a parent should feel heard because that's important because they're the voice of that child and they should be advocating for their child. But also going to it knowing that like the goal is for everyone to work together.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for all of that.
Yeah. Oh, it's
I
always a pleasure, Mom.
So cute. I have been asking all my guests about their thoughts on this podcast and the
Hmm.
motivation behind it. The Interspace Project is
Hmm.
what I'm calling it. And as I say in the very beginning, about that came to me from how we spent so much money to go to outer space and we don't
Yeah.
really go to inner space. So I've been asking my guests just to speak to what their thoughts are on going to inner space and what actually that means to them in terms of inner space,
Hmm.
and even in relation to what you do as a school psychologist,
Hmm.
how important inner space is.
Yeah. I think the cool thing about my job is that I get to be sort of like oftentimes the first mental health person most kids interact with. So that's like really, it's like a really nice, like kind of special part of my job.
Yeah,
And I feel like too, I get to create space
yeah,
for like really going inward and knowing that like all the things happening there are okay. It
yeah,
doesn't always mean something horrible. I mean, sometimes we need to ask for
yeah,
help, but that's what I love too, because usually when students are coming to me, that's them asking for help.
yeah.
Especially the high school. That's why I love a high school. I will never not have a high school. They're my favorite.
Uh-huh.
I love the teenagers. And they just like they're very insightful. And I think they have something to teach us. And then I love being able to talk to them about like, okay, well, let's like get curious about what's happening. Let's talk about it, let's explore it. And that's just, I don't know, just a really special thing to do to be able to open that door for them to start thinking in that way. And even with the little kids too. I mean, it's just I feel like a gift of this profession.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's so important for us to explore what's going on inside of us, all the parts that we say, that's what we say about the podcast is, even the ones that might seem dark and mysterious. And I think there's a
Hmm.
somewhat of a stigma around, we don't want to feel bad, we want to feel good, and we kind of
Yeah.
don't want to be in discomfort, and we want to make it all better.
Right.
And so that's what I wanted to do this podcast for, is to help people understand that life isn't always feeling good, you know.
Right.
And I love that you're the first point of contact, for these children. And I guess, so what's one helpful tool, like if a high school kid comes to you and says, um, Mrs. Herman, I'm, struggling with something XYZ. Is there something that pops out? I know there's probably a multitude of things, but something that you think
Yeah.
might be helpful for
Well,
people.
actually, there was something I heard just recently, like a couple of years ago, that kind of changed how I like approach that. It gave me this whole little friend. I think it was Dr. Lisa, um, was talking about just adolescence and talking about helping them understand like what mental health is. And the way she framed it, and I never heard it like it's usually how we explain it, but she just did it so succinctly. And that like being mentally healthy isn't feeling happy all the time. Being mentally healthy is being able to weather the tough times and while appreciating the good. So it's like knowing you can handle what's coming.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things she mentioned too that like really stuck with me is saying like no matter what a kid is saying to you, you always say, wow, I would feel that way too if that were me. And so I think just like I was like, oh, what a good little phrase. And it's oftentimes like what I would try to express anyway, but just that simple phrase of it, like, yeah, I would totally feel really stressed or really mad at that teacher or really whatever it is, right? Overwhelmed. I'd feel really overwhelmed too if I were you. Because oftentimes it's true, like if I
Right.
were in your shoes, I would feel the same way. And just starting the conversation with that connection of like, yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Those are legitimate feelings
And
is a really powerful thing to offer
that's
teenager.
so important because that's our basic need, right? Is to be
Mm-hmm.
and to be heard and to be validated. And I think a lot of this is my personal opinion or thought on there's so much suicide going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's the highest is the leading cause of death, in
Yeah.
high school kids. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's like because I think they don't know what to do with the discomfort. And when
Yep.
someone can validate that for you, then you go, oh, it's not just me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times when we try and talk kids out of their feelings, which we
Right.
have to do with the best intentions, right?
Right. But I just
We
think
want to make
that's
it
one
better.
thing I've noticed. Yeah, I'm working with teachers over the years, and that's something sometimes I coach teachers through is like you cannot be afraid of a child's feeling. Like that's the thing. I think adults are afraid sometimes of kids' big feelings.
Which reminds me of a story I always tell about you.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yikes.
When we moved to the house with the pool in Chesapeake,
Uh-huh.
you were like kindergarten, first grade ish, and you were crying one day. I remember sitting
Mm-hmm.
with you in your bedroom, and you're crying and like, I miss my house, I miss
Mm-hmm.
my house and my friends. And I said, but we have a pool. I remember saying, like, but this house is better. We have a pool. And so then when I studied with Dr. Kersey at Old Dominion,
Yeah.
and studied parent ed and
Yeah.
child development, I realized that was really a wrong, bad mom move. So I tell
Like,
myself all the time when I try and explain that to people
I
that
don't remember. Just so you know.
you've repressed it.
I guess maybe that's yeah.
Anyway, that whole thing of I was trying to help you feel better by saying, but
Right.
we have a
Yeah.
pool. This is a better house. We have a pool. And instead
That's
of
such a
going,
natural instinctive response though, right? Like when a child is in distress, our first instinct is to say, don't feel that way. Like it's okay. See all the reasons why it's fine.
yeah,
And I think that we'll put on a song and dance and distract. And I think that's not helpful. And I think it makes it harder to move through the feeling. And I think that is such a common misstep that parents make with really good intention.
I know, right? Exactly. And it was because I studied with the best of the best at Old Dominion in
Mhm.
Virginia with the Catherine Kersey, and I learned that. But I
Yeah.
didn't know. And then again,
Right.
that's part of the Inner Space Project for me is like, let's raise awareness. I mean, it seems like a simple thing, but most people don't know it.
Hmm.
People are
Yeah.
learning it. We're learning, baby steps these days about emotional awareness. But I love
Yeah.
that's, to say, what is it you say? I probably would feel that way
I
too.
would feel the same way if I were you. Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
It's just so
Okay.
powerful and so simple.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. This is
Yeah.
great.
Always a pleasure.
We'll definitely do it again. Um,
Yes.
and you still have your website?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't think. I don't know. Things are a little busy in public ed right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was doing some work on the side for a while, but no, right now that I've come back to the public school like in person position, which is fine. That's where I am right now for this season of life, and that's okay. It's good. It feels good to be helpful because again, I'm serving a district that's really underserved and it needs support. These kids are really struggling.
Yeah.
So it
So,
feels good to be there for them.
so people can find out more about you on my website
For
under,
sure.
under
Absolutely.
the Moms
Yeah.
in Real Life section. And
Yeah.
again, sign up for that course, Moms in Real Life. I think it's really
Hmm.
helpful. And yeah, thank you so much. And
Of course.
for what you do. I mean, it's being in schools is hard these days.
Hmm.
And
Sure is.
where our kids are all day long. So
Hmm.
it's
I
really
know.
important. And I know that the kids and the parents are really grateful for you. And
Yeah.
I'm
Just do what
grateful.
you can. Oh, thanks, Mom.
And not to
I'm grateful for you for introducing me to the profession.
mention, and I'm your two beautiful children are
They're pretty great.
Very blessed to have you for a mom too. But
yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Elizabeth. And we will
Sure thing.
have you back again soon. All right.
Sounds good.
Welcome to the Inner Space Project Podcast, where we explore the full spectrum of emotions, from joy and love to sadness and fear, taking you on an inner space journey that challenges societal norms, encourages open dialogue, and raises awareness about all the parts of us, including the ones that may seem dark and mysterious. I'm your host, Dr. Patti Ashley, psychotherapist, author, TEDx speaker, and clinical trainer. Thank you for joining me as we navigate the labyrinth of emotions, dismantle stigma, and pave the way for a more compassionate and connected world. Do you ever Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this inner space journey, and we'll come back again for the upcoming episodes. For more information about the Inner Space Project and all the other offerings I have for you, please visit my website, www.pattiashley.com, PATTIASHLEY. Thanks again, and I'll see you real soon.